And we are the Non-Profits, the show where we talk about politics, news, and current events through a skeptical, humanist perspective. I'm looking out a dirty old window. Down below, the cars in the city go rushing by. I sit here with two other non-profits who probably don't get this reference, and I wonder why. You guys know that song, right?
No.
Okay.
Right over
I'm
the head.
I'm sure someone out there found that funny. Hi, everybody. How have you guys been?
Hello.
Hey.
We've been good.
This is okay. So I love this episode in particular because I have side chats going on with both of you. I consider you both to be good friends outside of here, and we have conversations a lot. So now I finally get to do a nonprofits episode with both of you, and really it just feels like I'm just continuing the conversation that we've been having for months. So this
I
is
feel like we should do a big group hug.
Group
I know,
hug, big
that
group
was
hug,
very,
Yeah.
very sentimental. Nice.
Well, let's start from the end over here. Introduce yourselves to everybody. Laura, what are you up to?
So I'm Laura from Unapologetically Me. And I haven't put out content there for a little while, but I'm still planning on pushing it once I kind of get a flow between Unapologetically Me and all this other stuff I'm now suddenly doing, like nonprofits. I also did recently start the podcast Skeptic Hangout, where we discuss just random topics from a skeptical perspective. So anything from aliens and religion to politics and conspiracy theories. And we just sit around and have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, that's what I've got.
I'm waiting for the divination episode. That one will be awesome.
Oh yeah. We need to have you on one of our episodes too, Puck.
I'm honored. Thank you. What about you, Arden? What are you up to?
Well, I've been doing every week the Transatlantic Call-In Show, which is where we take calls from anyone who wants to talk about anything and everything trans-related with my good friend Katie Montgomery. We try to approach that also from a skeptical point of view, and you can also catch Puck and I on my Twitch streams from time to time. We play World of Warcraft and just kind of hang out and have discussions. So still, skeptical atheism stuff in there, but maybe not as much the focus of that.
See, this atheism doing show stuff, it just snowballs, doesn't it? Like I started doing YouTube stuff just over a year ago, and it was just like, oh, fine, I'll make an occasional appearance, and then that turned into having a weekly, and then that turned into volunteering for the ACA, and now this is my sweet 16th show with the ACA, so this is a big milestone for
happy
me.
16.
And yes, I'm on with Arden on her Twitch stream, and it just keeps snowballing from there, and like hearing you guys' experience mirroring mine. What was it like when you first started compared to now? Are you less nervous doing these shows, more nervous? What do you like now, Laura?
Nervousness doesn't factor in for me so much because I've always been kind of a get up in front of the crowd. I did acting in high school and stuff. So for me, it's more comfortable and familiar is where I was never nervous to begin with, but I was really unfamiliar with all the people, with the processes, with how to be in front of the camera. With my videos specifically, I know Puck, you and I talked about like, do I write it and read a script, or do I just go off the top of my head, and tried both of those and figured out which one worked, So it's really more about familiarization. But yeah, I think what's great about our community is that it's still so small that once you do get started and you just start to meet people, we all kind of need each other. So we all kind of get on each other's shows and share each other's stuff and talk about each other. And so I think that's kind of great. Like that kind of got me from starting this fledgling tiny little channel and not knowing what I was doing to like jumping in head first.
And more to my interest too is that we get to know each other not just as activists but as friends.
Yeah.
Like Arden, I remember watching an appearance that you did late last year, and at that time everybody just seemed like so distant still. Like there's this pantheon of atheist activist YouTubers, and now you welcomed me into your ranks to the point where you and I now just hang out to play World of Warcraft. And I think that's wonderful. And what about you starting the Transatlantic show? What's the whirlwind been like for you the past couple of months?
I mean, I actually am similar to Laura. I did a lot of theater in high school and early college, so I'm also kind of maybe a little bit of an attention seeker. But I proudly will own that. But there is like a level of like just getting comfortable talking like on your feet, and kind of accepting the fact that you might not do everything perfectly and that's okay. As long as you are able to like approach things as an honest person to be like, hey, I maybe I didn't do that particular conversation as well as I otherwise would have hoped, but like it's a good lesson for going forward. You can improve yourself and, you know, moving down in the future. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a process growing comfortable, but it's one that I'm enjoying very much. I think this community is super stellar, and I've loved like all the people that I've gotten to meet. So it's been cool to have all these tight friends, and we're doing all these cool activist things. It feels nice.
So take it from the veterans that you see before you hear, or are listening before you, if you're listening to our podcast. If you are thinking about putting on some content out there, just do it. Just get on your phone and sit in your car and start talking about what you want to talk about. Because in a way that all three of us are going to nod to, whatever your content is going to be a year from now, you're going to look back on this content today and say, wow, I can't believe that's where I started. So just start. Your content is going to evolve as you do, as you get to refine your production techniques, as you get to know people, you'll get better. But you don't get better unless you start. Well, anyway, this week we're going to talk about atheists and their place and perception in modern society, some misunderstood allegations about homeschooling, global tendencies of those who are not religiously affiliated, and we'll end by grading a top 10 lists that says who we are. But before we get to the good stuff, let us bow our heads and give thanks. This show is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and promoting positive atheism. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel and click on the like button below and set the notification bell on so that you are always notified when a new episode premieres. Watch our newest episodes premiere at 3 p.m. Central Time on the Nonprofits YouTube channel. You can support us at Patreon at patreon.com/thenonprofits. Feel free to join us in our fan-run social media outlets. You can find most of the Nonprofits hosts on the Atheist Community of Discord by going to tiny.cc/ACA Discord. And you can also join us on our Facebook fan group at facebook.com/groups/nonprofitslive. Support the ACA by shopping at smile.amazon.com and selecting the Atheist Community of Austin as the beneficiary. If you find yourself already shopping at Amazon, be sure to use that link to help out the ACA. We appreciate it. Check out the new Atheist Experience Network on YouTube, a one-stop shop for all ACA shows in podcast form on one channel. Subscribe at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts to listen to episodes of the Nonprofits, the Atheist Experience, and all the other ACA shows. Tell us what you like, what you don't like in the comments, or email us at nonprofits@atheist-community.org. As with all of our shows, links to the topics and news we discuss are available in the description below. Feel free to pause this video, read the material for yourself. Don't just take our word for it, but make sure you come back to hear the discussion. And boy, if you have one takeaway from this, let it be this, that we are but offering our opinions, and by no means should you take it and just run with it. Take a look at the material, not just what we have, but do the research on your own. Don't take anybody's word for it. Advocate for your own understanding. Okay, that being said, play ball. Let's see what we got today. Wow, Laura, could you lead us into this first? We usually do one article at a time. This time we were talking about two articles that seem to be talking about completely opposite things. So, Laura, could you give us a start on what we're doing here?
Yeah, first I'll just give like sort of a quick overview of what the two different articles are, and then we can sort of get into like the discussion about them and what the differences and similarities are. So the first article is titled "Atheism is Declining," says report. What should Christians do? And it's a report that kind of goes over, it was a report that was released by the Study of Global Christianity, the Center for the Study of Global Christianity. And it just takes all the stats of religious people worldwide, including different Christian denominations, and it just compiles trends and data. And from what I understand, the data pretty much all came from the UN. So it's global data that the UN supplied to them that discusses where Christianity is now, where Islam is now, atheism, and all that. And so by their reports, atheism is on the decline and Christianity is on the rise, and that religion in general is rising, but that Christianity is rising fastest. So that's Article 1. Article 2 is titled "Church Membership is in a Free Fall. and the Christian right has only themselves to blame. And this article details how more and more and more in America, Christians are leaving organized religion and leaving churches. So it would appear that in America, religion and Christianity is on the decline, if not at least organized religion is on the decline. So here we have these two articles that seem on the surface to say sort of two different things. So what do you guys think about that?
Arden, what's your take on that? Two seemingly opposite conclusions.
I mean, I think there's a little nuance in the differences here. I think one is saying like Christianity is rising globally or whatever the exact claim is, and the other one is saying church membership is falling. I think this kind of gets into I mean, I've had talks with a lot of other atheists in the community before about how sometimes the religious nuns or the unaffiliated are often still very much attached to some sort of belief, but it might not just necessarily be one that's attached to like a specific denomination. So I don't know, maybe it's possible that the sampling method for the global Christianity had a very like broad definition for what their inclusion criteria was. I'm not really sure exactly what this could be, but it definitely is very interesting, food for thought for sure.
The first thing that I thought of when I saw these two conflicting articles was a discussion about the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate, where it was thought that it was just a bad idea to do this debate for any reason, because either way Ken Ham is going to find a way to win. You can either say, look, clearly the atheists are winning, we need more funding, give us more money because we need to keep doing the fight. And if the opposite were true, they say, look, we're finally making some headway here, we need to get some more money so we can take the fight even further. So it seems like really good spin. And of the two articles here, one of them is clearly from a Christian organization, and we'll get into some of the fun things they talk about in there. But that's what they're saying, that atheism is on decline. We're winning. But now this does lead to the next interesting question for me, is that the joining organized religion, or at least affiliating with a church in particular, is on the decline. And I can't help but wonder if QAnon had something to do with that, and all the craziness that happened in, we'll call it, the past 4 years. What do you think, Arden?
Well,
oh, sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Or no, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think that it does mention in the article that Trump and everything that happened during the administration in QAnon did give a little additional bump to this decline in churchgoership, but they've been showing trends over the years that go well beyond the Trump administration, QAnon, and all that stuff. So I think really that the church decline, I think that did cause a little like a hiccup or a bump where massive amounts of people left quickly, but the ongoing trend still suggests that it's sort of an ongoing thing in America. So I don't think that there's, in terms of long-term churchgoership, I don't think that the QAnon stuff has had as big an impact.
So to you, it's just the trend is continuing where it was already going anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Arden, what's your take?
I mean, this kind of, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, because I know this kind of also ties into some of the future articles in a little bit, but I do feel like, well, I don't know, there's part of it that's difficult, right? Because I think sometimes when people are separating themselves from a specific denomination, it might be because they would like to maybe employ some more like, it's hard, I'm just kind of hypothesizing here. They would have to maybe they will have some more like extreme beliefs or something. But at the same time, there's those people who are like, well, I kind of vaguely believe in God and it's not like tied to anything. So there could be multiple reasons. And, I'm sure COVID had a big part into, with people being forced to be at home for the most part for a year. I'm sure a lot of them had some space to, well, hopefully introspect a little bit more about that stuff too. But yeah, I'm not so sure.
So this might just be confirmation bias, but I've only been really active in the atheism community for a short time compared to how long my life has been. But I seem to be able to find more atheists and non-believers and the spiritual nuns a lot easier now than I would have thought to look like 10 years ago or 50 or 20 years ago. So this talks about global trends, but what does it feel like in your individual communities? Do you find that theism is growing or atheism is growing, or are we just getting better at finding people we're more like-minded with?
So you know me and my addiction with where does the data come from and what can you actually say is causation versus correlation. So um I don't think it's kind of like when you buy a red Volvo and then you look around and suddenly everybody has red Volvos, you know, like it'd be really impossible to say based on just my experience or Arden's or yours experience that because we're now surrounded by more atheists than we had been in the past, that atheism is on the rise, right? Or if it's a struggle 5 years ago to find atheist friends or a community, that there was less of us back then, right? So I honestly, you said confirmation bias earlier, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Not just with it seems like atheism is on the rise because we're building communities, but also with this article and the idea that because more and more people are leaving the churches, that they're magically correlating that with becoming less religious, where the data isn't quite there yet for that specific claim.
Yeah, I think too, with a lot of the extremism and the Christian nationalism that we saw in the past, really badly in the past year, but progressing in the past 4 years or so, I can imagine. I mean, and again, I don't necessarily have data to support this. I'm just hypothesizing that for a good amount of people, that has to be a turnoff. I don't like to try to cast all Christians, paint them all with the same brush. I imagine there's a lot of them that are able to see the at least extremist tendencies and are perhaps not feeling that they don't want to be associated with a specific, maybe association that they have with a belief in a certain denomination and just kind of carry their personal faith in that way.
Yeah, and that was really interesting with this article because the article really confirms that, Arden. It says they were leaving church not because they don't believe or because they found a problem with the religion, but because they found church leadership to be corrupt or too political or too extreme. And so I think in a lot of these cases, and again, yes, we don't have hard data for the exact numbers of people who turned from church goership to atheism versus church goership to just not attending a church. It seems to me like a large number of them are actually reaffirming their religion by leaving church. Like, I believe in these teachings and my church doesn't support those teachings. I mean, that's kind of what I got out of the article.
Yeah, I like that idea. I believe in God so much I can't be bothered to go to your church.
Yeah, you're too corrupt.
That's a really glib way of putting it, but that's what I heard coming from that.
Yeah.
No, there was something in the article that I want to point out because I'm going to fight back against this every single chance I get, including about 60 minutes from now when we're going to talk about it again. From the Christian Post article, I'm just going to read the quote here. Maybe you believe that atheists should be feared because there is nothing more detrimental to the moral fabric of our world than someone who has no God. And that's straight from the article. And boy, howdy, morality has zero to deal with appealing to a God. Okay. The way I see it, even if there is a God and has an opinion on morality, by definition, that still makes it subjective. Right? It's just the opinion of another mind. Why should I care? And if he doesn't have if he can't be bothered to look out for the interests of us fellow humans, then why should we listen to it? I much prefer for myself the secular humanist perspective because I love all of you wonderful people.
And now, did you pull that quote from the first article, Puck?
From the Christian Post article, yeah.
The Christian Post article. Okay,
Yeah.
so I pulled another one too that was a little bit antagonistic when it comes to atheism versus the theist. It says, unless we are willing to affirm our belief in the existence of God, we open the floodgates to tyranny and oppression. And that, yeah. So this whole article is talking about it on the one hand, it's saying, don't worry, Christians, like atheists are on their way out. But it's almost a call to action. Like, oh, they're headed towards the door, so quick, boot them out, And at the same time, I know it said at the end of the article, make a friend with an atheist before it's too late. and I almost question whether what they were meaning was make a friend with them to try and convert them or get to know someone before the trend dies out completely but it really did have this sort of I don't know, sort of an antagonistic rub that it was one more opportunity to teach Christians that atheism is bad and scary.
And just really quick, let's have a show of hands in our audience. Please raise your hand if you've ever run into that one friend who you realized was only your friend because you had the same church. Yeah, we've a lot of us have been there, and it hurt when I realized that a lot of the people who I thought were friends that I would stick with, when I left that particular religion or that particular church, they just lost contact with me. They just couldn't be bothered. I became one of those people that was a bad influence. You know what? We were just now talking, all three of us, about how you can't just paint the broad brush of Christian on people and assume any of their positions on anything. Okay. And you can be Christian or atheist and still want a separation of religion and government. You can be Christian or atheist and still want to promote positive atheism and see atheism in a positive light, and at the very least not misrepresent us. Okay. So if we can do that for you, you should be able to do that for us, and not take the word atheism and make it synonymous with being
Tyranny and oppression.
Yeah, with tyranny and oppression or anything like that. And that's please let that be the one takeaway if you're Christian and listening to this. Okay, we're just like you guys. Okay, we want what's best for the people around us. We play video games on the weekends. We're just regular normal people, and if you talk to us and truly get to know us and not let articles like this speak for us, then you are taking a step in the right direction. Went on a rant. Arden, what else did you get out of this article?
I mean, the reason I brought up the painting Christians with the broad brush thing was because I noticed the same thing you guys are talking about now, is that they attempted to, at the end, try to portray this article as something that was like balanced. The entire article, they spent smearing every single agnostic or atheist person that they could name throughout history. And it just kind of made me laugh because they were lumping people like the one that I thought was, they lumped Elizabeth Stanton, who's a suffragette, a women's rights activist in like the 1800s, in with who were they? Oh gosh, I'm blanking. There were some like political dictatorship comparisons going on. They were linking her to some very historical atrocities. And here we go. Yeah, with Leon, whose last name I cannot pronounce, the man who assassinated President McKinley in 1901, Cold War, like hysteria, a bunch, just these crazy things that are like, if someone's an atheist, even if they're a suffragette and a women's rights activist, they must be as bad as someone who would assassinate a president, or, the people who are pulling the strings behind the Cold War. It's really indicative of the fear that they associate with atheism. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I want you to know also, dear listeners, that the ACA is putting its money where its mouth is, because on our show, Truth Wanted, plug, this has been Theist Month, where every week we have invited someone who identifies as a theist to be a co-host on the show with us, to share their perspective, so that we don't paint them with a broad brush and we get to understand what their perspectives really are. We're doing it on our end. We're doing what we can to build these bridges, because you know what? The enemies are not each other. We have bigger things to be fighting right now. Okay. And I would like to think that we have allies among the people who identify as Christian, or identify as Muslim, identify as theist. It's not all of them. It sure seems like it, because there's a lot of really loud ones, and it seems like a never-ending fight. But you know what? We are making some headway. We have friends over there. What do you guys think about that?
So I think there's one small correction that I would make, is that like when you say stuff like that, yes, in terms of the ACI, I completely agree with you, trying to build those bridges and make that communication happen. But in terms of like the group of Christians versus group of atheists as a demographic, we have both in both. You have those who want to build bridges in both, and you have those who want to segregate and tear us apart in both. So we really have to be careful when we're talking about like atheism versus theism, when some of these problems are just personalities versus personalities. It's tribalism at its finest. And one thing that I noticed with this article, the first article, was that it really takes tribalism and it really focuses in on Christianity versus atheism, which I thought was interesting because atheism is or atheists are such a small percentage of the world population, and yet you have Muslims coming right up behind them and really competing for sort of like world. I hate to use the word domination, but like Christians have the numbers; they have a third of the world population, and Muslims are right behind them. And they're not making this a, hey, look, Muslims, we're still in the lead, right? Because that's a big foe. They're picking the kind of like on the little guy in this article. And I think like what you're saying, Puck, is it's very pointed. Like I think it has a point to it. And I think that is to sort of have an enemy that's manageable and that we can handle, and then or a group of people that's manageable and turn them into an enemy.
Arden, wrap this up for us. Last thoughts on this article before we move on.
I mean, I think I'm gonna co-sign everything Laura just said. I don't think there's a realistic chance of us like getting rid of Christianity. And I don't want us to feel like when we're saying that we shouldn't paint Christians with a broad brush, that you also aren't allowed to like criticize the things that they say. I think ideas are always worthy of criticism. There should always be open to criticism. Just, be willing to understand that like, as much as it might be nice to have everyone agree, that's a beautiful little fantasy world. I think it's a fantasy world, and we should also focus on sometimes some more pragmatic goals that we can work towards, which will inevitably include some Christians. So,
all right. Well, let's move on to something much more specific and some that hits some of us a little bit closer to home. Let's talk about homeschooling. And now, for those of you who are not in the know, we nonprofits get a look at these articles about a week ahead of time before we start talking about them. And some articles resonate with others more than other articles. And Laura, it looks like this one really hit you.
You're making me introduce two.
Arden will get the next one. But this one hits you for a reason that it doesn't hit me or Arden. So
okay, so first I'll introduce the article and then I'll explain why. The article is Newsweek says atheists hate homeschooling because kids spend time with their parents. And so this is an article about an article. This article was written by Hemant Mehta, and it's about an article written on Newsweek by Paul Glader or Glatter about atheists' views on homeschooling. And it goes over some criticism that American atheists had for homeschooling, which is that it needs to be better regulated, right? And their argument in the article, Glader's argument, was that the reason American atheists hate homeschooling is because kids are home more often with their parents and they're getting more of a religious education. So he kind of ties this criticism of homeschooling in with, it's because religious people homeschool and that gives their kids less exposure to other ideas. Now, the article we read turns that article on its head, and it kind of talks about, no, the actual criticisms all involve legislation around, is a child getting a well-rounded education, period. Whether that education includes religious education or not, is the education that they're getting sufficient? So it's kind of a little bit of a, what would you call it? Like it argues back against the point that Paul Glader made. So this is so interesting to me because I am an atheist and I homeschool my 3 children. And so as I'm reading it, like when I first read the headline, I was already instantly, cognitive bias was up, and I was already going to have an issue with it no matter what it said next. So I had to actually read it a few times and sort of digest everything that was being said, both by Hemant and by Paul Glader in his original article.
So my experience with homeschooling was my background, by the way, is in secondary education, and one thing that I did when I lived in Alaska was I would there were a number of people who lived in Alaska and their big reason Alaska was winter sports, right? Where in order to participate in some of the higher levels, one would need to commit more time to it and therefore cannot do a standard school schedule. It just gets in the way of training, especially because when you're training winter sports, it's usually during the school year. So my specialty was kind of taking student athletes in high school and helping them out through their curriculum. Now, this was not to give away my age, but before the days when the internet was used for distance education, because the internet was basically just Usenet and Yahoo back then, and the disc of like what 500 free hours of AOL that I don't think I ever used a single one of, uh, but that was what we had, and the only resources that we had back then was they gave you the binder with all the materials and said good luck, and maybe you'll get to call a teacher and talk to some of the people, but was in my area at least highly unregulated, where the idea was that you would be able to pass a test at the end of it. And if you pass that test, it really doesn't matter what you did with the rest of the course. We're going to assume that you went through the material and we're going to grade it on the results of this final exam. Now, this is but my limited experience for it, and this was a long time ago. So hopefully we can hear about some more recent homeschooling.
Okay.
Arden?
Yeah, I want Arden to
mean,
weigh in first. Yeah.
Sure. So my experience with homeschooling, I was homeschooled for 1 year when I was in high school. It was my sophomore year of high school, so I was like 15 or 16. And this was an entirely online program. It was accredited. It was like the best one that my parents could find for the area that we lived in. And my experience was very similar to what you're describing here, Puck. I mean, like, I'm sure I've seen some of Laura's notes, so I know I can tell she's probably feels very passionately about this. But I think also it sounds like, Laura, you take your kids' education very seriously, whereas I think my parents were kind of like wanted to be just disengaged if I was in public school. So they were just kind of like, here's the program, here's the computer, have fun, have at it. And I was able to Google answers for all of my tests and quiz, and I got flying colors that year. But yeah, I mean, I think, I'm sure that when it's done right and taken seriously with good oversight, that you can get just as thorough of an education. That's not my concern, but I do think there is a valid concern that a lot of parents don't maybe necessarily have the time or interest or ability themselves to give the amount of oversight that's necessary for that kind of education to reach the level that it might in a public school. But go ahead, blow that out of the water, Laura. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
No, I actually agree with everything you have to say. So I think that homeschooling across the board is very, very unregulated. And there's a lot of homeschooling parents who actually prefer it that way, because I can teach my students how I want, when I want, and like the subjects that I want. Right. So if I want to move them through math faster, I can move them through math faster. But if I want to go through English slower, I can go through English slower, and I don't have to stick to state standards. So there are some people, or state like methods. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Common Core, since I know that when we went to school back in the day, Puck, there was no such freaking thing as that crap.
Yeah,
right?
when I
But
did long division, it was long division. Okay.
Yeah. And I still teach my kids that way. I introduce them to Common Core concepts so that they know that there's more than one way to find an answer. And any math tricks that I know, I like pass on to them. But if you had to teach by a specific curriculum and that curriculum doesn't work for that child, that is where regulation and the whole public school model falls apart for a lot of homeschool parents. Like in general, whether they're secular, religious, atheist, whatever. That is a common problem that homeschool parents feel passionately about. But there is that small subset of people who either just take their kids out of public school because they want to not give them, like, I don't want them exposed to that. I want to teach them only the stuff I want them to know. And that can be dangerous. And then there's also parents like Arden, maybe closer to what your parents were, where it was like, well, I want you to get a good education. So here's this computer, but I don't know how to do it. So do it. Right. And maybe all the good intentions in the world, but they're not equipped to handle that education. And so for me, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is it's not a black and white issue, right? There is no, this sort of regulation will help with all families, or no regulation at all will benefit most families. Like, there's just no easy answer.
Yeah, and what I loved about doing what I did was I had parents who really cared about getting their kids not just through high school, but onto the next level and getting them prepared for college and onward. So I always had the parents who really super cared, but like Arden said, just might not themselves have the tools to be able to teach the subject material for one reason or another. Like maybe they weren't exposed, or they're just not good at it, or don't know how to teach. So I got paid handsomely to work one-on-one with students.
Nice.
One of them went to the Junior Olympics, so yeah, I feel like
Oh,
that medal
nice.
is partially mine. I'm kidding. No,
1/82nd of it.
yeah, but what gets to me here in Cincinnati is not the homeschooling, but public public schools versus private schools. And here in Cincinnati, that means Catholic schools. There are a lot of people, even non-believing parents, who would rather put their kids through the Catholic school system here in Cincinnati rather than the Cincinnati public school system. Now,
Mhm.
they'll have their own reasons for that, and I haven't tried to put a kid through public school here in Cincinnati, so I am not I haven't studied the issue enough to know why they would make one choice over the other. But here in Cincinnati, it seems to be that they are willing to forego the fact that they're going to have some religious instruction if it means they're going to get some better general instruction also.
I have
So go ahead.
I was gonna say I have friends who do that, who put their two boys into a Catholic private school, and they pay thousands a year to have these two boys in, and they're atheists, and they do it because it's like the best education in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk about education a lot here on nonprofits. I think it was just a couple of months ago when we were talking about vouchers and whatnot, and we seem to like to brainstorm and talk about future things here. So, what do you guys think is the good, especially now that we've proved that we can do distance education? What do you think is the right pathway to proper oversight of people who do want to homeschool, but realize that after that, you know what, they're going to it has to mean something, right? A high school diploma has to mean something. It has to prepare you for the next step. So what's the good compromise here?
Laura, you can go ahead. I feel like I need to think on this a little longer.
Okay, so I don't believe in a lot of oversight for homeschool. I think that is one of the things that makes homeschool so unique and such a good opportunity for kids, is the fact that you already have the government oversight on public schools, that we have a really crappy public school system nationally compared to other nations. And then me in my state, our state's damn near towards the bottom of the 50 states too with our education. And if I remember the exact place, I would say, but I don't remember. But so you already have a public school system that's failing, and it has all the government oversight and all the government funding and legislation and rules and regulations. Um, a lot of people who homeschool just don't have faith that that is the right way to raise your children. And what's interesting to me is they've shown studies where homeschool children test higher on tests and have higher graduation rates in college. And there's all this data on the helpful side of homeschooling with a kid's education. What regulations are really trying to get at is the other chunk of the population of homeschool children that aren't getting the great, stellar, awesome, above average education, that aren't testing, maybe not even taking the tests, so that their data isn't represented. What I would say and push back to that is that you have the same range of students in public school, where you have the bottom performers that do the worst or that drop out, that never get their high school diploma or that get a GED later. You have the stellar ones that go on to honors and they go on to college, and you have everyone in between. So to some respect, I would say that homeschool students do still mimic public school students, in that not all are going to be successful one way or the other. So I think little bits of regulation in terms of, are you educating your stinking child? Like, are they getting an education? Right? Maybe bare minimum, like tests, like benchmark tests. I can understand that. We have to provide what our curriculum is to our state, and the state goes, okay, they have a curriculum, great. Something like that, where it just shows that you're invested somehow in the kid's education. But I think when you get too heavy into the regulations, now you start taking a failing system and forcing it into another system. And I don't see that as being effective.
Arden, in 5 minutes or less, fix our public school systems.
Oh gosh. I mean, just to kind of echo some of the things that Laura was saying, this actually made me think of earlier when I was talking about, that I think there's probably on the bad side of public schooling, you might not see so much I'm sure there are people who are trying to purposefully, protect their children from certain information, but I'm sure more broadly, it's situations where parents just aren't equipped to give children the amount of information they need. But, the kind of what Laura's just saying made me think of this, that like, you see that in the public school too. There are plenty of teachers who are clearly, you kind of wonder how they got themselves into this job, because they don't really seem equipped to know how to give information to other people, let alone young people. So, not being as experienced with it, I would trust Laura's perception of like the data and the info. I'm also gesturing to the wrong side. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, that like, putting too much oversight would kind of take away the values of the homeschooling curriculum. But, I trust Laura on this. I think she's our resident expert currently. So.
And I'm not an expert. I just happen to be passionate about it. So I could be completely wrong.
No, and you're living it right now. You're in the middle of it. Like you said, you're homeschooling your kids. And one of the first things that got me particularly interested in the atheism YouTube scene was a fight in Canada between the YouTuber we know as Pelagia and a homeschooling system that was trying to push a young earth creationist curriculum, and the objections that he had to, the reasonable objections that he had to that. And this is where, like, there are some people who are into the apologetics part of being an atheist and the debating with people on the other side, and that's fine. That's good. We absolutely need those people. But for me, it's always been the rubber meets the road atheism that's been interesting, and that's why I love doing the nonprofits and what we do, because we're showing the actual, this is what happens when religion and society clash in ways that they probably shouldn't. Going back to that idea though of homeschooling to separate, where was I going with this? It seems to me that there's a good chunk of the population. When I think of education, I think of it as making the next generation more competitive in a global marketplace, right? Because the world is getting smaller, and we're having to compete with people in other countries for the same kind of jobs and positions anymore. And I have to remember that there's a subset of the population that doesn't think of it that way. They're not trying to compete. They're just trying to give the next generation the basic knowledge to exist within this community. And getting them into the advanced STEM courses, that's not really a priority. So giving them a religious-based education where they walk out of there more with a fear of God than the ability to do calculus, I can actually understand how that might be appealing to some people. I don't like it, but it appeals to them. So how do you fight that mindset of, we don't want to create kids who are competitive in a global marketplace. We want to stay in our nice little bubble.
But I think that's the majority of people in every community. I think the vast majority of people on Earth are just trying to get by to the next day and just making their living and doing their thing and doing their routine. And they want their kids to grow up and have a job and be stable and make a living and do their routine. They're not expecting their kids to be doctors and lawyers and presidents and like game changers, right? They're expecting their children to just be a little bit better off than they are, right? So I kind of think that you're onto something there with, there's this subset of people that are like that, but I really think it's the vast majority.
This is why I like having you on the panel, Laura. You push back on
everything you say.
Yes. And who else did that? When I was on with Jenna Belk, I couldn't utter 2 sentences before she was on me. It's like, well, no, I don't think I can agree with that. And I love that we are demonstrating how to have good, respectful, even disagreeing discourse. And that's why shows like this are as fun as they are. Any closing thoughts on this? Go ahead, Laura. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if every panel member agreed with everything, then what's the point of having panel members? You might as well make it a one-man show. I think that's why we're here.
Definitely.
Yes. And I proudly put my flag up there. It's like, you know what? There's a reason we have a comment section, and there's a reason we have the email. Thank you for popping that up on the screen. Wonderful crew, just at the perfect moment. get in touch with us. We want to know what you're thinking. If you disagree with us, hit us in the comments because we will engage. Arden, I know you engaged in the comment section recently, and I'll do the same. If you don't like something that we say or want to know more about what we believe in, we're accessible to you. If you email us or hit us in the comments or join us on our Discord, we absolutely will get back to you. We love engaging, especially we want to know what you want us to be talking about. Okay, Laura, you're right. You introduced the last one, so Arden will make you introduce this one here. This was an article that I don't know. I picked this out because I thought there was plenty to talk about, but it seems like it's one of those things that's too obvious. So anyway, Arden, take this one.
No, sure. I think there is actually some interesting points to discuss from this article. So this article is from the Pew Research Center. It's called "Religiously Unaffiliated People More Likely Than Those with a Religion to Lean Left and Accept Homosexuality." So basically, they're just kind of comparing a bunch of different countries and the degree of their population that is religiously affiliated and religiously unaffiliated, and what kind of political and social values that those groups might have on average. And the interesting thing that they found was that on average, most of the countries that were less religiously affiliated were more likely to lean left politically and to, as the title says, to lean left politically and to accept homosexuality. One of the points that I thought was really interesting, though, and this kind of harkens back to what I was saying earlier of maybe pragmatic future goals that include Christians, was they were talking about, I think it was Sweden, if I can find the point, was one of the only countries that had a pretty even balance of religiously affiliated and unaffiliated, about equal shares among religiously and unaffiliated of those who identify with with a religion in Sweden, still say homosexuality should be accepted by society, which I thought was actually that kind of made me feel very hopeful, because I feel and at least in America, a lot of religious people might be more on the what we would call fundamentalist and more likely to have a problem with homosexuality. But the thought that there could be plenty of people in the country who still hold to their religion, but don't advocate against human rights for minority groups, I was well, that's a really pleasant thought to me, that maybe that could be something we can aspire our country to, so people don't have to feel they're having their religion ripped from them or something in some grand victimizing narrative, but that we can still work towards a society that's better for all the people in the society.
Laura, your take.
You know what I thought was really, really cool about exactly what you're talking about with that chart with Sweden, and it has all the other countries, is so the different countries have where they're at on the scale of accepting of LGBT and left leaning and then not, right? And in each one of them, there's the unaffiliated dot and then the religiously affiliated dot. I got to do it opposite because the camera's opposite. But it's the religiously affiliated dot is always just behind it. And so what I think that says is religion might slow down progress a little bit, because it kind of ingrains these ideas into us that make us feel we need to act a certain way or believe a certain way. But it's not a foolproof measure against social progress, right? I think we're dragging that group that still holds on to that mentality, we're dragging them along behind us, and it just takes them a little bit longer to catch up. But I mean, even in the least accepting country, which looks like Russia, right? It has the unaffiliated way down there, and then the religiously affiliated is just below them, even lower. And then all these other countries were really, really, really accepting, and then the religious is just behind them. So I don't think that the gaps between the two are surprisingly significant.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. Is we're looking at that same chart, and everybody, please, by all means, click on the link in the down there part and look at the same dots that we're looking at. But there is a separation. In a lot of cases, it's not much of a separation. I think, what was it?
Exactly.
Slovakia and South Korea were the biggest separations, and a lot of places, Arden, you pointed out Sweden, they were neck and neck.
Yeah.
So that might even be within the margin of error of the study for a couple of those that were really close. But even though they are close country to country, there are some pretty wild swings there. I'm looking at it now. Russia, like you said, was way down low. Hungary is hovering in the middle. So if not religion, what do you all think is accounting for that difference in homosexual acceptability?
I'm gonna let Arden start with that one.
That's a deep question. Gosh, you know, I think. So you're saying besides religion, what do you think? What do we think is?
Well, yeah,
accounting for
because I
that?
mean, we're not seeing very big separations just on that scale of,
Mhm.
you know, dividing it by religiously affiliated and not religiously affiliated. But we do see some big swings when we go from country to country. And I'm just wondering what would account for that.
You know, I think religion tends to reinforce maybe some very patriarchal kind of old-fashioned gender roles, but I don't think that they necessarily originate exclusively from a religious worldview. So, you know, for a lot of these countries where, you know, for Russia, for example, I'm pretty sure I don't know if it's illegal to be gay because I don't know how that makes sense, but I'm pretty sure, isn't there some law where if somebody knows you're out, they're allowed to out you, or like, I don't know. I don't want to speak out of my ass. I'll reel that back, but there's clearly other social incentives for people to adhere to maybe some hurtful old gender roles. And I mean, we see that in, you know, even like America and the UK, like even in the atheist community, for example, with the whole Dawkins thing over the past couple of weeks, like, you know, even if you are free from religion and for the most part, a socially progressive person, you might still have kind of a yuck factor when you interact with a trans person or a gay person. And that's not an innate thing, but clearly it comes from somewhere. So it's really hard to say.
Like the one thing that I could think of, and again, this is just me trying to come up with what these countries have in common, is how important is it to fit in with the culture as opposed to how much are you allowed to express yourself and still, you know, that be embraced by the area around you. And as I look at some of these countries, I can't help but see a little Eastern European influence among the countries that were less accepting, where you know, so maybe there's something in the culture that makes it conformity within the cultural norms is more expected, and Japan's also sliding a little bit more on the left on that scale, where social conformity and context culture is very important, where standing out might not necessarily be something that is embraced, whereas here in the United States and in some other countries, individuality is a little more understood. It's like, okay, this is what you want to be, that's fine, we still love you anyway. And the thing that I was wondering about too, other than that, is how much does like not passing, what's the word I'm looking for, wanting to appeal to the previous generation
Tradition.
have to do with this? Yeah, let's call it tradition.
Yeah.
Wanting to appeal to the tradition of the older generation, and that's why we as the younger generation still want to act in those norms. How much of that is there? These were the ones that I came up with. What do you guys think of those?
So I actually was going to say that cultural influences are probably the most strong in those countries. Because if you think about it, the countries that are the lowest are like Slovakia, South Korea, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Russia are the lowest, the 5 lowest ones. And if you think about it, I think you hit it dead on when you said there's some really strong cultural influences that their tradition and their culture and their way of life is very ingrained in them, passed on from father to son, grandfather to grandchildren. And I think that when you talk about there's less of a focus on individuality. Now, I'm not like an expert on any of these cultures, so I could be dead wrong, but you pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. And I wanted to just be like, ditto, ditto. I mean, I think it's in their politics too. So I think that this cultural homogeny is very political as well. It is worked into how their governments are run and how their cultures are run, you know. So it's kind of well ingrained.
Homogeneity is your vocabulary word of the day.
Homogeneity.
Homogeneity,
There
the
you go.
idea of being like one blended thing. And yeah, then you have countries like Canada and the United States that make it more of a point of, we're individuals and we have a good amount of personal freedom and expression. And it's nice to see. And going back to that point that we were making earlier, that even the religiously affiliated is still the majority of them are supporting of homosexual lifestyles. So that further gives a little bit more credibility to the idea of just because you're theist doesn't paint you as our opposition. We like a lot of you. So what then? If we're to think of tradition and culture as more of an explanation of this gap than religious belief, should we start looking somewhere else to fight these fights instead of being anti-theist? What do you think we can do, and what do you think would be more helpful?
I mean, yeah, I think if you pay attention to like the media that we consume, like these things are still super deeply ingrained. Like I'm sure it hasn't been that long since any of y'all heard somebody say like, oh, be a man or something along those lines. Like those kind of things are really, they're so normal that it doesn't really feel like when you say those things that you're, maybe casting a like gender expectation on someone. But when you really think about it, you clearly are, because what does it mean to be a man? You're kind of suggesting someone should toughen up or not cry or what may have you. And you see this kind of stuff with like kid shows too. Every Disney movie, I feel like we could probably rant about this forever coming from like a feminist perspective, but like the role models that they give for young girls are often very dainty, demure, very like your highest goal should be marriage and finding the most perfect mate kind of thing.
Yeah,
like
with your
gender
prince
roles
to rescue you.
Yeah, totally. Like they're very deeply ingrained expectations that are hard for almost anyone to meet. It kind of innately makes you feel like you are in the out group and striving to be in the in group, because like nobody can really perfectly fit these. Everyone's gonna fall out of it in some way or another.
You mentioned Disney, and my mind goes to two places. First of all, my wife and my sister are big Disney fans, and they just watched Mulan. So that whole "Be a Man" song,
we sing that a lot in our house.
Oh, how does that go? You have the "Be as swift as a river"
with all the strength of a
I knew someone was gonna finish. That's good. It was that one, and it was Sleeping Beauty, who is basically a prop in her own life story. Right? It's like, really, is this something to aspire to? I don't know. But so it's nice to see there is a marked difference between what we'll call those traditional Disney shows and some of the more modern ones. There's still a ways to go, I think. But there's definitely a lot of things that have been changed, where I don't think you get a song like "Be a Man" anymore, unless they intended to present it in all their, mid-90s cultural wisdom. If they meant it to be ironic, if they said, no, you know what, we need to clearly show in this culture this is what this means, and we have to emphasize this in the show because we want to point out the class differences between men and women and why. Have you guys seen the new one?
I have not seen it yet. It looks gorgeous though.
I don't know how the new one compares to the remake, but I know that a lot of the new Disney reboots address some of the issues that the older shows have caused.
Oh my gosh, Aladdin. Like they make Jasmine the power person in that movie. Like she takes back her voice, and in fact, when we watched Aladdin, my brother and I both concluded that it should have been called Jasmine. Like it was more about her, and he was the secondary character. And
I don't know about that, Laura, because as soon as she's done singing her girl power song, she immediately gets imprisoned. So it's like,
it was bizarre. She did.
No, I get it. It was just a weird, shocking moment that she sings all about. She's a woman in charge, and then she's immediately taken out of power.
Yeah, and she does it in her head the first time. It's not even she thinks about doing it. Right? Like yeah.
No, but like they did that with Dumbo. They fixed a lot of the issues that that. The world was a different place back in the 1930s and 40s when a lot of these were made, and now we're taking steps. And you're nodding a lot. I think I interrupted you in the middle of something. So what did you want to add to the Disney craze?
Oh no, no. I think I was just I was agreeing with the conversation that was happening. I haven't gotten to see a lot of the new remakes. They're a little. I feel like I'm a little detached from Disney now, but it's just it was relevant for the point. But yeah, I don't know if Laura had more you wanted to add to that conversation.
Well, the one thing that I wanted to talk on also if is how many times have we listened to ACA shows like Atheist Experience where the person that they are having the most trouble with is an older family member, right? It's always the stereotypical racist uncle or the disapproving mother or grandmother. It's someone in a higher generation. I don't recall, although I'm sure it exists, an adult saying that their adult child disapproves of their deconversion. So how
Right.
can we kind of grease the wheels and make it a little easier for the top generation? I'm especially going to be taking notes because my parents are still believers. So this is a conversation that I intentionally avoid having with them, but maybe I shouldn't anymore. What do you guys think about, addressing these cultural norms and making it easier and more palatable for the older generation to come around?
So I almost want to let Arden go first, but then I almost want to steal it from her and be like, no, let me take this one.
No, go
So
ahead.
Arden, what do you
Run
want?
with it.
Okay. So the only reason I want to take it first is because I think that the trans community specifically, but the LGBT community at large needs allies with them, right? People who don't identify with those different gender identifications or sexualities, they need to be there walking alongside them and showing other people that like this is it's not okay to treat these people this way, right? Because it's like the Black Lives Matter. If the only people who are shouting that Black Lives Matter are Black people, then the movement is just going to go at a snail's pace. But if you have people from every race, every color, every walk of life saying, no, Black Lives Matter, right? It's the same thing with LGBTQ stuff is you have to get the everyday, like every type of sexuality, every gender has to be in there as an ally working together. Right, and getting those moms or those uncles or those old people who just don't understand or those young people who are taught to be bigoted, like exposing them to the other side, exposing them to different ideas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that completely. I think, kind of also bouncing off of what you were saying, Puck, I think I grew up, I remember it was really common, we would say before family gatherings, like, no talk about politics, no religion. And I feel like there was another one in there, but whatever. And, I think that's something we really need to throw out the window. Like, I feel like I have the utmost respect for people who I can have a heated disagreement with that can still respect me after, and that we can come back and have another discussion. Like that is something that I really appreciate. And that is something I've been trying to foster in my relationships with like my parents, for example. I know they very much are conflict avoidant because that's how they were raised, that same kind of mindset. And I think sometimes maybe I can come off as a little bit abrasive to them and other people because I'm very much conflict forward. But I feel like it's more useful because when I try to address conflict with people, I'm not trying to, castigate them as a bad person, or, I'm not, slapping a blasphemer label on people for being against social progress or something. I am just trying to address a problem and to like make my side of things heard and not feel like I'm not allowed to share my perspective, because I think as a trans person, trans people are often kind of put in this situation where, we have a bunch of white men in the Arkansas State Senate who are legislating over everything about trans kids. But, the second trans kids voice our dissent to these kinds of laws, they go, no, we know what's best for you, against best medical practice too. Like these, it really is a matter of trying to get over this cultural thing where we're afraid of difficult conversations. I think we need to just be ready to dive in and to maybe get mad at each other and maybe not like each other for like a week because of how that conversation went, but then to be willing to come back and have the conversation again and to keep trying to move things in the right direction. And I think we're seeing that more and more.
On the next episode of Nonprofits, stay tuned. We will be talking about Arkansas. And no, I don't know when we're going to be talking about that, but it's on our minds. And like you mentioned, Laura, that people who are outside of the community that need the advocacy are the ones who need to speak up about it. Now, I will be the first to admit that I'm still learning a lot about LGBT plus issues, and especially transgender issues. I don't know a lot. And my way of dealing with that is to just say, I don't know a lot and trying to find the ways to have the conversations and try to find the ways to ask the questions and be an advocate wherever I can to help the people who don't understand, at least get to my level of understanding, and then continue my understanding so that I can continue to help more and more. So that's what I'm doing. And you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be perfect to stand up for what you believe is the right side. Just get out and continue to advocate for your understanding. So Arden, thank you very much for having that after party on Saturday nights, where I spend a good amount of time just sitting and listening to your community talk about things that I never would have known about, like the difference between just as a little cliffhanger here for you guys to look it up, the difference between SRS and GCS. Did I get those right?
Was it the hormone therapy?
Or no, those are actually acronyms for what would be considered bottom surgery, or
okay.
so GCS or GRS rather would be genital reconstructive surgery, and it used to be called SRS, which is sexual reassignment surgery. So there are kind of just this evolution of
old
language.
term, new term. Yeah. Gotcha.
Right. And it seems overwhelming. It seems overwhelming, but there are people out there who, as long as you approach it with a sense of humility and understanding and not defensiveness, but go out there saying, hey, look, I don't understand this and I need help understanding this. There are resources available to you, and there are people who are willing to have these conversations with you. I'm one of them, and I'm willing to bet that the other two on the panel are here as well. So. Okay, so we've dealt with some really heavy stuff. So I want to have a little bit of fun now with this last one here. I have some note cards. I'm just going to pass these to you, Arden, over here.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and take these if you could. Pass those down to the left to Laura.
Here, Laura.
Laura, go ahead and grab those. And I have a stack here for you too. So if you could just take these here. Okay.
Thank you.
So what we found is a nice little list on the again on the Pew Research website. It's a list of 10 facts about atheists, and what I thought would be fun to do would be to go through these one at a time and just hold up the number that says how much you personally relate to that comment or that article, and let's see how. First of all, how well this article represents us. And second, maybe I guess we might need a new PR person if we're not being represented properly, and we need to be. Hang on just a second, and then we'll take this from top. And you guys got to lead an article. So I'll just read these off one by one, and then we'll see who's got what.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so number one. The share of Americans who identify as atheists has increased modestly but significantly in the past decade. Now, we just got through talking about two articles, one of them that says that atheism is growing, one of them says that it's not. So where are you on this one? Do you think it's increased or decreased?
Yeah, definitely.
10 increased. Okay. We are making strides in the right direction. But I don't know, because I don't know how to feel about there's a lot of people who still are holding on to something about being religious, right? It's usually nothing big. They just don't want to say atheist. And I wish there was something that we could do in our advocacy that makes it a little bit more like let's not make it a dirty word. Let's just be able to say atheist, and it's just as ordinary as anything else. Okay. So number two, then, here we go. The literal definition of atheist is a person who does not believe in the existence of a god or any gods. It says here roughly 1 in 5 self-described atheists say they do believe in some kind of higher power. So let's see, how much do you guys believe in some kind of, this is just the exact words here on the poll, described believe in some kind of higher power. What do you got?
Can we almost put this into two separate
I don't have a
there is
zero.
No,
Really?
I don't have
there
a
is-
zero,
there
so I'm
is
gonna
one of
cover the
these.
crown.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. So when I think of higher power, I don't necessarily think of like a supreme being type of higher power. I think of it more as something just that's bigger than myself. And if
Ooh, you
you've
went
gotten
deep with
to,
it.
yeah, if you've gotten to know me in any way a lot, you'll know that my favorite animal is bees, because bees can accomplish a lot more than the sum of its parts because they're all working together. So I think of things like community, and I think of things like obligation to your fellow man as a higher power. Like, we have I have an obligation to my neighbors, I have an obligation to my friends, and so I think of that as a higher power, even though it's not a supernatural being entity type of higher power. That's how I
Oh,
interpreted it.
fuck. I think you went and humbled us.
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I,
or sorry, go ahead, Laura.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because I actually have a point that's on one of the coming up numbers that kind of echoes what you're saying. I guess just the way I conceptualize it would not be as like a higher power, but like I hear what you're saying, and I do like value that. Sure.
No, that came from me because I did a someone was I was the subject of their research paper, because they were writing about 12-step projects, and they wanted to know, as an atheist, what I thought of a couple of those steps in there that talk about a higher power. And I pointed out to them that higher power here does not ever specify a deity, and that you could look at other things like family obligations or social obligations as something that you could take to be something that's bigger than yourself. I don't
think
know.
that's a great way to look at it.
I'm gonna get it in the
That's not
comments.
what I get. Well, I mean, that's not what I get out of the actual paragraph, because then it goes on to say none of the atheists we surveyed said they believe in God as described in the Bible.
Oh yeah,
But
I
it
don't.
kind
I
of
don't.
so,
Yeah,
but what it's saying is like, well, maybe atheists believe in a higher power in the sense of a deity or a God, just not the God or a specific God. And so I totally love what you're saying, but it's hard to get that out of that
no,
paragraph, right?
I get it. Spiritual, but not
Yeah.
religious, right?
I love how you took it and just spun it in such a positive way, though. I kind of want to change my answer based on that.
Well, it's not too late. You held up at 0, but
Look, I'll do
maybe I've
this. I'll
changed
do
your
this.
mind. Let's
Ready?
see what we got.
Ready? Go like,
Yes.
oh, look, I believe in community.
Yay. Okay. Number 3. Atheists make up a larger share of the population in many European countries than they do in the US. I don't think we can argue this one. I mean, that's just flat out numbers.
Yeah, that's just math.
So I'm just gonna agree.
Ding,
The
ding.
ironic part, though, is that a number of those countries that you see shaded in on the map over there have a state religion. They have a king and queen that are the head of their religion, and they have religious classes, and they have a religious structure in their countries. So it's weird that some of those, like Denmark stands out to me, Sweden stands out to me. How do you have a state religion and you have more atheists than we do? How does that work?
Maybe it's because they make it not such a big deal. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense, but it's like we have this huge argument between like the separation of church and state, whereas they're like, yeah, the church is more of a figurehead. Let's not worry about it.
It's like they don't actually get anything done, but we just
It's like
say that our state religion is Lutheran, right?
right, or the queen's not really in charge; she's just sort of there, you know.
Okay, here's a fun one, because let's see. Number 4. In the US, atheists are mostly men and are relatively young.
This is a
It's another
weird.
statistic one,
How
though.
much do you buy this? I don't know.
Well,
I
if it's statistically true, it's statistically true. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like-
how much do I like it?
Yeah.
Like, not very
not
much.
okay.
I know
Like,
that
I'm a woman and I'm old.
Don't call yourself old. What does that make me? One of the biggest well-kept secrets in the atheism community is just exactly how old I am, because I have that nice complexion that ages really gracefully, and I have that hairstyle that takes away 10 years.
Ugh.
I still get mistaken for my mid-20s, and I'm okay with that.
I have an 18-year-old son, so I'm not saying my age, but I'll give you his.
No, okay. I guess I would have thought of atheism as a young movement. Like you tend I tend to think of a lot of young people. I don't know how this compares, but I guess this surprised me because it didn't surprise me because I that's just what I expected. I don't hear a lot of when I think of older people, I guess I just think of them as being more theistic or more prone to being theistic than younger people. The men versus women split kind of got to me because it's something that I just don't really spend a lot of time thinking about. But it makes me wonder, because I'm in one of those families, and I know a couple of others where one person in the family is religious and their spouse is not, or vice versa. So like it seems like there are a number of relationships like that.
I also thought it was interesting, the race thing, where it says atheists are also more likely to be white, which is 78%, versus 66% of the general public that's white.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that some of these numbers are sort of interesting, and they're kind of worth talking about and discussing in terms of atheist community activism. Like, how do we bring in more diversity and get more people hearing the message and challenging things,
Yeah, like, and I'll tell you, like, we're part of the Filipino culture, it's hard to tell where being a Filipino stops and being a Catholic starts. Right. And so it's there's a little bit of a blending in there of not just the religious belief, but rejecting the religion is also seen in some ways by some people as rejecting the culture. So maybe that might account for why minorities, and especially ones who see a good amount of connection to their community, might not want to come out as atheists for one reason or another.
Well, because their community is religious. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, number 5, and this is where the disagreements are going to start. Are we ready for this? Here we go. Yeah. Number 5, atheists are more likely than U.S. Christians to say that they often feel a sense of wonder about the universe.
I want to hold up all of my cards. I feel so strongly about this one. 10, 9, 10 million. I love this one.
More likely than Christians. Okay. Yeah. Where is the camera? There we go.
Yes. Hardcore.
This is why you guys keep
inviting the more often gets me, because I don't know.
Well, okay.
I will say for myself, sense of wonder, huge.
Mm-hmm. So am I just weird? Like, is this because I grew up in Alaska, right? And there are a lot of people who they say, "Oh, I want to go see the glaciers," or "I want to go see the Northern Lights." And I guess I grew up with those, like, just being everyday mundane things. It's like you have to try really hard to impress me with geological formations. Right. So I've never looked at anything and just been like, oh, that's so beautiful, So, and at the same time, I can look at something like an internal combustion engine and look how intricate those parts are, that they have, thousands of revolutions per second. And the timing of the chemical reactions are so precise that they can get it to work like that. That's pretty awesome.
But do you feel a sense of awe from that? Like, do you get a sense of like, whoa, that is amazing?
I don't know that I would call it awe, but what do you got, Arden?
So, like, for me, the reason I feel so strongly about this is because I felt like when I was a theist, there was very little appreciation for, like, how crazy it is that we exist at all. And when you're an atheist and you're thinking, like, evolutionary perspective, like, the fact that the organism of me, like, the very specific lineage that had to occur to get to me, that had to occur to get to, like, you, Laura, and you, Puck, that we can all, and the fact that we happen to have, like, now know each other, like, to me, that is, like, insanity. And that makes me feel so much, like, deep connectedness to, like, humanity. And, like, you were saying you don't appreciate, like, a mountain range or something, but I grew up in Vermont. Nothing but mountain ranges. Nothing still hits me like a beautiful starry night sky. Like, humans, for as long as humans have existed, have been able to look up and see, like, this beautiful thing above them. And, like, I don't know, that I feel like that wonder really makes me feel connected to humanity. And I feel like I'd never appreciated it nearly as much before I was an atheist. And to me, it was like, wow, like, millions upon millions of years of evolution have, like, connected us to, like, every organism in our lineage that has felt this. Well, maybe it hasn't, because it clearly Puck doesn't, but many of them feel that appreciation for the, for nature. And I think that's really cool.
I'm sorry. I don't want to see the Grand Canyon. It's a hole in the ground. How impressive could it possibly be?
So Puck hates geology, everybody.
I do.
Yeah, that's really sad.
And I'm not a fan of astronomy either. Moving on to number 6 before I really get it in the comments. Atheists were far more likely than Christians to describe hobbies as meaningful or satisfying. So how satisfying would you say hobbies are to you?
Again,
Big.
I hate the comparison between atheists and Christians. I know that
Okay.
it's a study, but how do you determine that?
Yeah, and I'm guessing that the question is, where do we find our meaning in life? Like we get questions all the time. Like, if you're an atheist, then how could you possibly have purpose? We
So
find our purpose.
that's a really good question. If you don't mind me interjecting and going completely down a separate rabbit hole, when we're talking about this survey that produced these answers, what if the way that you take a survey, if you're a theist versus an atheist, is different, right? Like maybe you feel the same sense of physical, like awe or wonder, whether you're a theist or an atheist, but because you're a theist, you're like, oh, that's just God, and you take it for granted, right? Or, yeah, my hobbies are great, but this thing that I have is more important, right? My relationship with Jesus or God is more important. Like I'm wondering if almost like
The framing of the question.
and how they'll interpret the question is different, but maybe somebody who's a Christian who's an artist is just as passionate about their art as I am. Like I don't know.
I think that's probably true. I'm sure there are Christians who are very deeply passionate about what they do, but I think kind of the same as for the last answer, I feel that like when I was a theist, I feel like I had far less appreciation and far less like motivation to have life goals and hobbies that make me feel fulfilled as a person, because it like didn't matter as much, this life is like my family very much cared about heaven and stuff in the afterlife. And so to me, like the fact that I don't have that makes me appreciate what I have now infinitely more.
See, I'm super glad you're on this show.
Aw.
Well, no, because you have that perspective, whereas I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's really easy to, when you're a theist, to kind of dissociate yourself from, I think, how much meaning you are purposefully looking for. And I feel like I put a lot more thought and intention behind the kind of things that I have in my life, because like I've only got this one as far as I know. So I want to make sure that every moment is special in some kind of way.
Okay, we're running out of time to blow through the rest of these, so let's just get through 7 to 10 with a little bit of speed here. Okay, number 7. Most atheists express negative views when asked about the role of religion in society. So with 1 being the worst and 10 being the best, how do you view religion in society?
I'm gonna go with a 7, I think.
Okay.
I'm gonna be a little controversial here. Go right down the middle.
Right down the middle. Okay. Yeah. I wish we had more time to talk about this, and we're probably gonna have to defer this to another episode about the role of religion, because I guess, we all have different views, and even among us atheists, we have some really woo atheists out there. We have tarot readers and whatnot who strongly believe in this kind of stuff. But I think churches and religion, they act as like community centers, and they can do some benefit. So I don't really think about it in a totally negative way until they start to try to force legislation. Like that's really my big gripe, is when they start to get into courts.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Where I start to deviate is point by point. You can't tell me across the board that something is good or bad. We have to start bringing up individual points. You start talking about things like attacking gay marriage. Yeah, no, I'm going to attack that back. But you start talking about feeding the hungry, and I'm going to donate to that person who's a Christian who's feeding the hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8. And this, let's just, this is on the honor system here. Okay, so just describe yourself. How informed are you about religion? Atheists may not believe religious teachings, but they are quite informed about religion.
I think,
nice! The going
either
joke,
all really humble or all really overshooting what we.
The going joke in this house is that if you really want to know what's in the Bible, you ask an atheist. They probably know more about it than you do, and it's probably why they're an atheist.
I've heard that before too.
Yeah. I think I would have thought I was a 10 maybe a couple years ago. As I've gotten into the community, I think that is that the Dunning-Kruger thing, where I feel like I was like, okay, realizing I was overconfident. I don't know as much as a lot of people, but I think I'm pretty well informed.
I think seeing one video from Digital Hammurabi will slow me down really quick.
About the Bible. You watch 10 minutes of that video and you're like, wow, I'm nowhere.
Yeah. I need to start over again.
All right, number 9. This is the one we're gonna. I think we're all going to agree on this one here. Most Americans, 50% say it is not necessary to believe in God to be moral, while 42% say belief in God is necessary to have good values. So, do you think it's important to believe in God to have good values? I don't have a 0 card, so I'm just gonna say 1.
Yeah. No.
We'll just do that 0 cover.
You know what?
Yeah.
I think of religion, or I think of morality as like, there are some people who think of morality as vertical, like appealing to an authority or appealing to a god or a moral standard and being correct as far as that goes. Whereas I think morality is more of how I'm treating my peers, how I'm treating you two as friends, how I'm treating my neighbors, how well I tip my waitress. Hashtag atheists tip better. I will get that challenge right there. That was nice. Okay. But that's how morality is to me. And you don't need a God for that. You just need to be conscious of how your actions affect other people.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just going to plug myself really super quick and say I did a whole video on this. But basically what it comes down to is because I don't believe in a God, right? Man created God, man created morality, and man worked morality into their religion, right? And you have different moralities within a single belief system. So there is no Christian morality. Every single individual Christian has their own subjective morality. So to say that God is necessary for that morality is like it's almost like, well, which morality is he necessary for? That Christians or that Christians? You know.
Very good question.
And the last one here, we got to go through this really quick. Americans feel less warmly toward atheists than they do toward members of most major religious groups. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much have you personally felt this in your own personal experience in life about you being an atheist and that making people feel, yeah, that's all of us. I was going to say this is either a cliffhanger for another article. Whoa, it is. I wish we had time to get into this, but now we're going to have to like leave this as a cliffhanger for the next about how poorly atheists are treated in our communities. But this has been eye-opening for a lot of these questions where we thought we'd have agreements, and then here I am holding a 2.
I love it. No.
Thank you guys for playing along with me. This has been a really fun episode. We always go into this like super nervous, and then we're like, oh goodness, we only have 3 minutes to wrap this up. So we've been having too much fun here. So let's do this in reverse order this time. Arden, let's start with you and tell us where we can find more of you.
Watch Transatlantic on the Line on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Central Time, and catch me on Twitch Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday usually. Those are the most important things to plug right now.
Laura, where can we find you?
Okay, so I'm actually going to not plug me. I'm going to plug something different.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you talked earlier about not knowing much about the trans life, like what they're going through or how to understand what the process is. One thing we can do is if you check out the Trevor Project, they have tons of educational stuff for allies for how they can understand the trans and LGBT community better and better support them and better help. And it has volunteer opportunities and all kinds of stuff. I use the educational stuff for my kids to teach them about different genders and different sexualities and stuff like that. So hit up the Trevor Project and learn about your trans people and your friends, right?
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
This episode has been a blast. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one. So everybody listening and everybody watching, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.